welcome to this live talking about why avoidance can be obsessed with their exes, even when it looks like they're doing everything in their power to get away from an ex who they seemingly really liked. Now, I wasn't initially going to do this as a topic. I'll be completely honest, I had other plans for this evening. I had the option of reading a book on ADHD, playing Monster Hunter, but no, I chose to do something radical and come online with you all tonight and talk about avoidance obsessing over their exes. And I understand I caused a bit of a stir because that video that came out today where I was talking about avoidance obsessing over exes, people were like, what do you mean they're obsessed? They've done everything in their power to get away from me. I'm like, yes, I understand that piece, but let's talk about what's actually going on, because this is very much a thing that happens, and maybe the word obsession is a bit too strong of a word. So before we get into this, rules apply as always. Welcome to tonight's live. There will be Q&A. If you want to leave me any questions, feel free to throw them in the question mark box below, and I will happily get into it. But let's start with talking about what I mean by obsession with avoidant attaches, right? I know we normally think of obsession in its very traditional definition, which is when you have a lot of passion, enthusiasm, and sometimes a bit of an addictive tendency to be very hyper-focused on a specific or multiple things that you find enjoyment out of, right? And it can lead you to maybe being overly fixated on something to your own detriment. And that's what we think of when someone demonstrates overt signs of obsession. However, what about when we deny certain things that we may be interested in? It's not uncommon for a lot of people who have secrets, who have a lot of parts of themselves that they repress, that show up in funny little ways down the line as well. So let's talk about what this can mean for people who are severely avoidantly attached, right? Let's break down the usual thing that happens when they abruptly end a relationship with you. Let's say Jack and Jill have been dating. Jill has just abruptly ended things and she's moved on from Jack, basically acting as though he was the scum of the earth and she never wants to see him again. And she goes on to date someone new. And according to Jack, she appears to not be looking back. She's in fact blocked him on social media. She's done nothing to try and reach out and explain her actions. And Jill has just, appears to be, according to friends, mutual friends, living her best life with her new person and everything's looking amazing, for her. And Jack's feeling in a world of pain. And he believes that, she's moved on, she doesn't care about me, she just never really loved me at all. An understandable narrative, but it's not necessarily the truth. And here's what I'm going to break down. For someone to go to that amount of effort to try and remove themselves from a partner, not even survivors of narcissistic abuse move that quickly. Usually it takes them a much longer time to get out of a shitty relationship. I'm not even joking. The rate of speed at which avoidant attaches who are severe will eject themselves from otherwise pleasant relationships. And I'm talking about the otherwise pleasant ones, okay? It's like Speedy Gonzalez on steroids or crack. It's like, whoa, okay, you really exited yourself out of that one. And usually, as we know, there's not a lot of premeditation for it, and it's really strange. So what the hell's going on? How can you be at the height of love and then suddenly act 180 and get the hell out of Dodge that quickly, right? We've discussed that many times. So let's look at this from an emotional perspective. This person, Jill in this case, has overreacted. She has blindsided Jack by leaving this relationship, blocking him on all socials, and going off to be with this new guy that she's with, right? So, what might be going on for her, and how might this story develop? Maybe in this new relationship, Jill is constantly bringing up to this guy what an amazing ex her last ex was. Or conversely, bitching about how Jack was just so needy and obsessive, and she keeps bringing it up over and over and over again. And it gets to the point where the new partner is like, babe, I know that you reckon you're over Jack, and it sounds like he was, terribly, obsessed with you, and it's not a good sign. But you do seem to talk about this a lot. Like, are you sure you're over this? And Jill will be like, yeah, I'm over it. I'm fine. Like, it's not a big deal. Yet she still finds ways to bring it up again and again and again. Then eventually, as the relationship with this new guy deepens and progresses, Jill quietly, unbeknownst to this new guy, unblocks Jack. She even starts following him on socials and being, curious as to what he's getting up to. Now, Jack at this stage is probably in therapy and is like, why is my ex suddenly reaching out to me, like, by stalking my socials? I don't understand what's going on. And he might be confused because he's uncertain as to whether or not Jill wants to try for 2.0, whether she's interested in him, if she's just there looking, at his photos. She's now liking his photos, as things develop. And Jack's just like, I don't understand. Should I reach out? What should I do? He's maybe even watching a few people on social media wondering how to get an ex back, unsure as to what this dynamic actually means. But the basis for this odd behavior is unprocessed emotions, right? Like I was saying in today's story, when people are suppressing a lot of emotion over something that they might actually have an interest in, it can often show up in some very funny ways. A classic example of this is that people who are heavily closeted and homophobic might also, be venturing into gay bars and having very unsafe, unsolicited sex with other people, who are of the same, sexuality as them, for instance. They find ways to, meet those needs that they've repressed in themselves in some very odd ways. And this is where the emotion of disgust can often be the shadow aspect of obsession. Where obsession is quite obvious, disgust can actually be masking someone who has like a big interest in something that they are ashamed to admit. And what do we know that avoidant attachers, particularly fearful avoidants, are deeply ashamed of? Having emotions in general, and also having a feeling of being out of control to another person, and feeling like, oh no, what happens if this gets real? What happens if we're actually going to develop into a proper relationship as well too? What will it mean to me? I'm worried that if I'm with this person and they're really great, it's going to validate that I'm, unlovable for real. I got to get out of here, etc. Lots of fears. Now, some other ways in which this secret obsessive behavior might actually show up is that your ex, your avoidantly attached ex, recycles and does the Olivia Rodrigo deja vu with the new person that they're dating. You were supposed to go on holidays with them, you were supposed to have kids with them and get married, now they're doing it with the next person. And they're taking all of that energy, they're taking, all of that unresolved emotion and dumping it onto the next person they're with. And again, don't you find it a bit strange that they've suddenly found the love of their life immediately off the back of you? Like I've said in videos before, true love doesn't work like that for a lot of people. They don't usually just find the love of their life after abruptly dumping someone who they were seemingly very emotionally invested in. So there is a lot of, wackiness and also still a lot of unprocessed emotion that gets transferred to the next person. And it's interesting because the new person might be feeling quite overwhelmed by the love bombing at this stage. They might be thinking, oh my God, this person really loves me. How thoughtful. They're taking me to concerts, to festivals, to holidays, where they've really put a lot of thought and energy into this. It's like, you do realize all those plans are actually meant for another person, but you're now getting the, the full benefit of that. So there is a lot of that. So another thing that we said that I was also referring to in my little example of Jack and Jill is the social media stalking. These individuals can be adamant that they don't want a bar of you going forward when they abruptly end things. But let me tell you, when they're orbiting you, when they're, haunting you on socials and checking you out, they can also be secretly obsessing over you too. And, part of the basis for this live and that video that I did a while back that got posted today was actually coming from the book Avoidant Abuse by Dr. Ria Khan. And I thought that she made a really fascinating point. She was basically saying that for an abuser, when they're putting this amount of time and attention into a target, that they're laboring a lot of energy and emotion in this. And they simply wouldn't do this if it was someone they didn't care about, right? You wouldn't go to this amount of effort to try and still find a way to keep an ex in your life if you didn't truly care for them. And even though the signs of still caring for you may not be obvious or apparent to you, I can assure you, as with a lot of these cases, it's not always obvious. Even Mike, who I think is a fabulous coach who's a recovering fearful avoidant, often talks about, on one hand, I might act like I don't care about any of my exes, but I certainly had flashes of moments where I did care and I'd miss the heck out of them. Sometimes when I got drunk, I would let my fears subside and I'd reach out to them and try and continue things with them as well too, before the shame hit and I was backing away again. So, there is dysregulation at play here as well, where the fear can win for a while before eventually some of those surges of positive memories start to come up for you, or for them, I should say. And then in terms of some of the other things we need to think about too, is the fact that a lot of these individuals, even if you block them, will find ways of still reaching out to you. Like I had a client who was telling me that they blocked this person on like every known social app, and somehow they found a way to get in touch with them via a business email, and we're still trying to, make a connection with them. So, where there's a will, there's a way. And I also want to talk now about something that does happen that Dr. Ria Khan also mentioned in her book, Avoidant Abuse, which is that it's very common for avoidant attachers who are severe in their attachment injury to make stories in their heads about the exes that they're with. They might say things like, oh, my ex is a stalker, he, she, they are needy, they're obsessive, they can't get over me. When in fact, ironically enough, they're the ones who've created a partner who, seemingly can't function without them because of their hot and cold behavior. They themselves might also secretly desire being wanted and desired by others because of all their childhood neglect. They themselves have needy parts and may also be repressing the fact that actually I kind of want this person. And this can show up where, for instance, I actually got a great example of this today. Someone was saying my avoidant ex who blocked and dumped me was still, hanging around like a local area we used to go to. And when we connected, they acted like a complete stranger. I got another similar story where someone was saying, after 8 years of having moved on with my life and just getting on with everything where I was happily married, this person reached out to me being like, you're stalking me. And they were like, I haven't looked at your page in like over 8 years. And there's also examples of where, co-workers who've been together, they have been like, they'll see like an avoidant co-worker who, seemingly dumped their ex and got rid of them, only to then still be like staring intensely at them across meetings, or, maybe sending them, emojis and memes on the local, on like the community or the work accounts that they use for communicating with one another too. So there is a bit of that. I even had actually a pretty extreme example the other day, which was pretty awful, where, some of them, which are quite, nasty in their behavior, might, for instance, this is like a male to female dynamic example. There might be a male boss with a severe avoidant attachment style who might actually be quite predatory, is actually being a bit of a sex pest with the female co-workers. And even if he's married, he might be flirting with a lot of the women who appear quite vulnerable, where he's, very subtly love bombing them, trying to say things like, oh, wow, I love your energy. Your lips are so beautiful when you smile. And the poor girl is just like, I'm also married and this is also feeling a bit weird, like what's going on? Yet he's denying it. And then even if he has like a shutdown episode where he's cold and indifferent to her, which again, people might think, oh, it seems like he doesn't care. That indifference, that seeming indifference does not literally mean indifference. It could be a lot of energy is going in to showing up in a way that comes across as I don't give a shit about you, when in fact that's a lot of, protection from a lot of, maybe hurt where they feel rejected inside and they don't know how to actually communicate that with you. So they're coming across as really cold and impassive. And sticking to this example from, this person I was hearing about, even if, for instance, they find a way to fire you from this job because they can't handle this, they might, still stalk you across your LinkedIn profile and try and, keep tabs on you, even though it's like, but you fired me from this job. You didn't want me around here, and yet you're still trying to interact with me. Like, what's going on here? So many of these avoidant attachers still want control over the dynamic. They still want to have a degree of access to you. The reasons as to why they may reach out to you after the fact can be down to a lot of different things that I've discussed before, including them feeling lonely, bored. They might be at a point in their life where they don't have anyone else to go to, or they're simply doing it because they think that they're not being selfish by letting you go. We had such a great experience together. Why would I necessarily throw that away? And, their very egocentric views of things can mean that they have a tendency to just believe that it's, they have the right to still have you around and be able to, interact with you whenever they like it. But it's going to be on their terms. You try reaching out to them and they're usually going to, again, give you that seeming indifference. Now, let's talk about the avoidant perspective of their exes, because this is something that doesn't get talked about a lot. Yet ironically, the dating coaches who would try to do the whole no contact and how to get your ex back, a lot of them are actually avoidantly attached, self-admitted. Now I'm going to use one, and I'm going to do a little bit of armchair psychology. So for those of you who don't like this particular bit of armchair psychology, I appreciate you don't have to like me for saying this, but I am going to just share what I've noticed, because I have a pretty good bullshit detector and a good radar for this stuff, if I do say so myself. I'm going to name a specific person. So, for those of you who don't want to hear this, feel free to opt out. And if this is someone you like, more power to you. I'm sorry if I'm about to make someone feel upset because they've got a favored influencer who I'm about to just be quite blunt about. Okay, with that all out of the way, let's get into it. I believe there's a coach on Instagram called Coach Cole. I can't pronounce his last name. It's like Coach Cole Zellseiger or something. Big, fearful avoidant vibes, 100%. And he often looks like he's carrying tears in his eyes whenever he communicates. It's just something you can pick up. Now, that's not the thing that I want to talk about. What he does a great job of, and I don't even know if he's aware of it, is actually communicating the avoidant perspective of what they're expecting of their exes. He's very well intentioned. He talks a lot about how to use no contact to try and, move on from a breakup. However, I have my own views of no contact and its functionality off the back of a bad breakup. And for those of you who don't know, generally speaking, there's no reason to be seeking closure off the back of a breakup if it's been a mutual, healthy one. Usually the reason people are in these messes is because they've dated someone with a severe avoidant attachment style. And the thing with Cole, I've found, is that he tends to push the whole go no contact because you will look more attractive to your avoidant ex narrative. And even if he's not saying avoidant ex, it's pretty much the only one that would be, the target of this. And I don't like that narrative on the basis that it's a very egocentric narrative. It's this whole idea of look indifferent to me, look like you're moving on, look like you're beautiful and sexy and doing your own thing, look how you're slaying life, and just look how you've moved on without me. And what have avoidant attachers grown up with? Oh, that's right, emotional neglect, indifference. So of course, they're yearning to see you look like you're unbothered, you're not thinking about them, you've moved on, because it creates a trauma bond for them, because that's what they're looking for subconsciously. They're looking for you to essentially be that indifferent Superman, Superwoman, super person, because that's part of their fantasy. If you're confronting them about their BS, they don't like it because then they're going to feel shame and they're going to back away. If you try and get them to come back and work on things, they're going to get angry and make out like you're a needy, obsessive person, which is confirming another narrative of them. So really, all of this is to say is that a few things. One, don't love Coach Cole's approach to a lot of this stuff. I get that he's trying to help people out, but I often think that he's going about it in the wrong way. Secondly, when it comes to a lot of these get your ex back coaches, I think that the whole no contact approach, let's just talk about this for a second. No contact is designed to help you heal off the back of these experiences, and I actually don't believe it's appropriate for a lot of you when you've first gone through this. If you're someone like me, where I've had this happen to me a few times and I know not to personalize it, I can go no contact very easily and I'm just like, bye. But if you're new to this and you're actually needing a lot of answers off the back of this, I often tell clients and people, you should still be seeking answers because it's important to try and find out what happened. And up to a certain point, you got to realize you're probably not going to. But there are ways and means when you are more emotionally regulated to go back to this person and say, I did not like the way I was treated. Just wasn't helpful. No contact as a strategy is often so intense for people when they've first gone through this because their nervous system simply can't handle it. It's too hard for a lot of you because, like if you're recovering from binge eating, you're not going to be able to go cold turkey with that straight away much of the time because of a lot of what's gone on. You're often having obsessive thoughts like, what will they think of me if I, done this to them? Oh my God, will they think that I'm mad with them? I'm really worried about never hearing from them again. And of course, when you go down the line and you've healed from this, a lot of those things don't really matter to you. You're like, whatever, like this is a good way of backing out and protecting my peace. But for a lot of you in the beginning, you should not be doing no contact if it's causing you too much distress. And that's often why I'm like, well, I think you might need to do a bit of low contact where you still have some degree of interaction, even if it's just stalking their socials for a little bit, just to calm your nervous system down. Because eventually you will get bored of it, and eventually you will find that you can slip into no contact down the line too. But like I said, it's not for everyone. And I think that a lot of the no contact coaches, who are ironically enough also avoidantly attached, wonder why that is, peddle this advice because this is them engaging in their fantasy thinking about how to make you a limerent object and to make you as dopamine high as possible. So that's why I'm like, yeah, probably not good to go for that approach. Not to mention that when you got all these coaches telling you, when you go no contact, it destroys the avoidant. Not always. In fact, if anything, it can often make them want, they can often just not even give a shit. Sometimes they've, moved on with someone else. They're not looking back. And frankly, it's not a guaranteed strategy for getting anyone back, and it should never be used as a weapon to try and get an ex back who is avoidantly attached. Because a lot of you know, who watch my content, that if it didn't get fixed after round 1, it certainly ain't going to be fixed by the time you go into round 2. And it keeps a lot of people who are love addicty into really dangerous messes. I've said on record, if you're dating someone who boomerangs, regardless of whether they're fearful or dismissive avoidant, it's often worse than just one and done. So yeah, something you got to consider. So yeah, overall, I just want to round out my little TED talk here by saying, even though we traditionally think of obsession in, the kind of behavior where someone is chasing down an individual, is trying to keep them in their field of focus, they're trying to find ways to just, interact with this human being, the opposite can also occur in ways that are more covert, that aren't always obvious to you. Please be careful, especially if you're new to this space and you've just been broken up, to not necessarily, hold on to these fantasy and also these narratives of being like, they never cared about me. I can assure you that a lot of that belief system of they never cared about me is 99% likely coming from earlier pain that you've experienced from someone who has been emotionally unavailable to you, hot and cold with you in your life. And child brain internalized this as, they don't love me. How do I know this? Because I've been through it myself and I've seen it in a lot of clients. The hallmark of anxious attachment, or even just at the very least abandonment wounds, is did they love me? I have seen that happen so many times for people where it really hurts because they worry their ex didn't love them. It is a particularly awful wound to have stepped on, I'd actually say trampled on, by an avoidant ex when they, do this kind of behavior. And so please understand that on the surface, it may look like this person doesn't give a damn about you, But I can assure you that once that narrative, that wound is not so hyperactivated and you find ways to soothe it, ideally in like an IFS, internal family systems way, you know, doing work that actually helps you to address that, you will see it's not so much a case of they don't love you, they don't care about you. It's a lot of their protective mechanisms from feeling, you know, love, vulnerability, intimacy due to their fear. So please be very mindful of that. I can see a lot of questions are coming through, so I'm just going to say, guys, feel free to direct them to the little question mark box below so I can keep this neat and tidy. Otherwise, I will go through the chat and work through it, but at times it's a little bit difficult to get through all of them. So yeah, just want to say on this last piece, please be very careful of the stories you tell yourself when it comes to these breakups, because it is so easy to believe our wounded parts that are telling us things like, they never cared, they've moved on without me. And I've got to be honest, I find that for a lot of women, you actually do a much better job than the men do. And I think for a lot of men, you've been socialized, I should say we, because I'm also a man, we've been socialized into not wanting to own our emotions. We've certainly we take, I think, rejection way too hard at times because we haven't got the necessary social support to help us through it. I'm not saying women don't struggle with this, they absolutely do. But I think generally speaking, we live in a world that has socialized and also acculturated men to just deal with it. And those wounds that haven't been addressed end up getting exacerbated because we live in, quite frankly, a very emotionally unavailable world at the best of times. So yeah, it's really important to bear in mind, regardless of who you are by sex, that you just be very mindful of the stories you tell yourself. Right, Q&A time. Let's get into it. So, what do we got here? Oh, I love this question. Why am I so fixated on his feelings? Asking myself one question at all times, did he love me? Well, without quoting Olivia Rodrigo, I'm still obsessed with my ex, even though that's not actually what she says. I think that I would say there's a lot of things going on there. So firstly, I'm not going to scream codependency because I think that is often a very overused word that doesn't actually define what's really going on here much of the time. But here's what I think could be happening. I think there's often a big preoccupation with the avoidant attacher's thoughts and feelings because for those of us with abandonment wounds, when somebody has left us emotionally, physically in the past, we're often hyperfixated and also hypervigilant of the emotional well-being of other people. It's a survival strategy. It comes from, there's like a lot of fawning that often is involved with this. So we're talking out of the trauma responses, fight, flight, freeze, fawn, right? The fawn response, a very sophisticated trauma response, is all about being very vigilant of other people. You know, it demonstrates itself through people pleasing. It's about how to get along with others so they don't necessarily leave us. And when it comes to when you've gone through a breakup with someone who's like mega avoidant, we're often in such a state of shock where we're also deeply, deeply hyperfixated on what they're thinking and feeling, what they're possibly doing right now. And I've got to say, for those of you that are neurodivergent, I know you guys struggle, guys, girls, people struggle with this so hard compared to holistic folk on the basis that I know object permanence can really be a huge thing that you need. So it does become such an issue when you don't have a lot of this information present. But generally speaking, what this all really means is that you right now are in such a state of shock that if you had your avoidant partner telling you all these things, it would help regulate your system. Part of your journey in healing from this down the line is to learn to self-regulate, to also make your own discernments about other people, to not personalize other people, because much of this is coming from a place of being more preoccupied with how they are feeling about you, because if they're feeling any way or another, it sets you off because you feel, and this is all childhood wounding, you feel if they feel any particular way or another, it has a huge impact on your sense of stability and survival. So you've got to be bloody careful when that fawn response activates inside of you. And I gotta tell you, it sticks around for quite some time when you've gone through a breakup like this, usually the first time around, because you're so concerned, like, what did I do wrong? Is there a way I can fix this? How can I get them back again? It's all that people-pleasing energy coming out, right? And I'm not going to jump ahead and say it's codependency, because it's not. People who have a fawn response aren't necessarily codependents, but it can definitely bleed a little bit into that realm when it goes unchecked for far too long. And I think the key component that would lead it into codependency is when we start engaging in denial and fantasy. And it's like, okay, I think we need to like put our head in reality for a bit. So yeah, I'd say for a lot of you, you're probably still in shock. You're probably still, hyperfixating on them. But I can tell you, and this is a glorious phase when you're able to switch it, when you are able to flip the switch and go, but how do I feel about how this person treated me? Man, you're going to have a completely new realization of what happened, and it will help you to stop fawning in the future so you don't necessarily ruminate on this any longer. I can see someone here has read, I don't understand. Do they obsess or move on quickly and date with someone else? I thought this was related to what I was talking about. So going back to what I was saying previously, which I was covering earlier, when you ask the question, do they obsess or move on quickly and date with someone else? Both. So even if they move on quickly with someone else, they may still have repressed feelings for you that come out in ways that aren't traditional signs of obsession. But it could demonstrate signs that they're trying to deny some obsessive feelings for you that they're not necessarily acting on. So please be very mindful that even though a lot of avoidant attachers may go off and act indifferent towards you, a lot of that indifference is just bluster and defensiveness. It doesn't accurately represent some of their own honest thoughts and feelings about their exes. So yeah. I can see someone here said, I've stopped fawning and I'm now in the anger phase. I have so much anger at the way I was treated. I love the anger phase. It's just divine. It's really, really good. And you'll also find that for those of you that get to the anger phase, you have more than just the avoidant attacher that you might be angry about too. You may find many years of suppressed anger coming to the surface about many people who may have invalidated or hurt you in the past. So welcome. This is a beautiful phase for you. And to anyone else who's in the anger phase, it's such a great place because you'll be like, oh, thank God, I'm no longer ruminating on this shit as much as I was before. I can see someone here says, hi, Ken, I missed the start of this live and wonder if it's recorded and will it be available on your page? Thanks, Alison. Yes, it will. So don't worry, it'll absolutely be there. All right, let's keep going. Why did he make up bizarre reasons for the breakup? I'm still so confused. He blamed so many things. Example, my work stress, which he never talked about, and he called me emotionally unstable. It made me feel so awful. He never said anything mean to me ever. All right, for my regulars who come to my lives, a lot of you will recognize that as rationalizations that have been absolutely BS. It's up there with the usual things like, I like mountain hiking, but you don't like mountain hiking. We're clearly not compatible, therefore we should just break up. You know, what you just said there about how he's fixating on your work stress and you're emotionally unstable is a couple of things. He's got a rationalization there that the work stress is something that bothers him and he doesn't like about you now, even though that's such a hyperfixation. It's a real sign of relationship obsessive compulsive disorder, and a symptom of that is flaw finding, little minute things about you that, bother him. And it's not a surprise that he's plucked that as an example, because if you think about a lot of avoidant attachers, they often worry that they're not able to actually support you or meet your emotional needs. So what a surprise that when your work stress comes up, even if he said he could handle it before, because people pleasing, he can't necessarily handle it now because he probably feels that if things develop in the future, he's not going to be able to be good enough to meet your needs in that particular department, is my best guess of what's going on there. But the second piece of that, which is you're emotionally unstable, 100% projection. I dare say he's probably had a very overbearing mum or a very emotionally unstable person in his past. And I think that if he thinks, let's just say, this is a great example also of exaggeration. Let's just say you have been talking about stress at work, right? Like, Oh, my boss is difficult. Oh, the day was hard. Oh, I feel like I'm not earning enough money for what I do. Valid things that many of us would probably gripe about. And if he thinks that you are emotionally unstable because those are the things that you're understandably venting about, this is a great example of when avoidant attachers demonstrate their extreme sensitivity to demonstrations of emotion, because they themselves often repress and deny themselves the opportunity to do this themselves. They also denigrate you if you do this, because they just sort of think, well, just deal with it. That's how I was brought up. Because a lot of them were. A lot of them have had, very neglectful childhoods where they were just expected to self-regulate. Although self-regulation for an avoidant attacher usually means looking for coping mechanisms to help them avoid said big feelings that are coming up. So please bear in mind that when it comes to someone like this, someone like this who is basically saying you're emotionally unstable if you've never demonstrated signs of emotional instability before, it's likely projection. And I dare say his reaction to you is a sign of emotional instability. Many individuals who are severe on their attachment style, doesn't matter if you're anxious, disorganized, dismissive, often display signs of emotional instability and can act like, frankly, I've got to be honest, when they're in that state, they can behave in ways that feel like they're an asshole to us, and they're being rude, they're being abusive, they're being bitchy, they're being, a bastard about certain things. The point simply is to say that, a lot of that trauma response can feel very unpleasant to be on the receiving end of. So please be mindful of that too. But I'm sorry, I also want to say I am sorry that you've gone through that, because I think it's awful to have someone basically tell you, who's supposed to have your back and is supposed to love you, that I can't deal with your work stress and you're emotionally unstable. Like, what? Like, where is this coming from? Like, what on earth, what on earth do you mean? It's just rude. So anyways, I'm sorry that you've gone through that. All right, let's keep going. Mine didn't move on to anybody else, but just kept me as an image he admires. Why do this to himself? I love this question. Okay, I actually got an answer to that from someone who identifies with avoidant attachment, and they've got some amazing insights into this. So they were basically saying, a lot of avoidant attachers have fantasy thinking. As a lot of you will know, they often think of the perfect partner who they'll never ever have to feel stress or any interpersonal issues with, right? And they're often looking for that magical feeling that will confirm I found the right person. So when it comes to exes, when they're still orbiting you or haunting you and they're still looking at you, this is where some of their limerent thinking can come up. We often think of limerence for anxious attachers, but I gotta tell you, if you're a survivor of emotional neglect, you are no stranger to limerence. It just may show up very differently for you. And when you're avoidantly attached, you may demonstrate signs of limerence because you come up with stories about how, my ex, the phantom ex, is such an, that we were so amazing together. They look so beautiful. They look like they've moved on. They look like, they're just really great. I don't remember what issues we actually had with this person. And I know another person I was speaking to earlier tonight was telling me how sometimes they may send you very cryptic messages, maybe even in the songs that you once shared together. Maybe you got like a playlist somewhere and they send you like song titles to convey what they want to say to you because they don't actually have the capacity to express what they want to say to you as well too. So, they might be doing this because they're actually having a quiet moment of actually obsessing over you from a very positive place. They might be just reflecting on how amazing it used to be together with you as well too. Now, key thing I want to state at this particular point before anyone gets their hopes up, this does not mean you go back out to this person and you say, hey, if you're feeling this way, why don't we get together? Because that will shatter their fantasy and they'll often think, oh no, I don't want this, I'm feeling pressured, this is too much, goodbye. They are trying to keep you at a distance because that's the ideal space for them to feel safe. This gives them a position to obviously project a lot of their fantasies onto you, and they may build the courage to reach out to you and communicate with you, but it's all really on their terms based on how emotionally, secure they feel. And I really, look, I gotta be honest, I can say this because, I'm not emotionally as attached to the situation. I do feel sorry for them. Like, I mean, for anyone who's emotionally dysregulated, it's really shitty to feel like your fantasies and obsessions are getting the better of you, that you aren't able to feel grounded with regards to, reality. Like, I gotta tell you, when I started doing this work and I actually started truly hitting reality, it was like a new version of me. Like, I really do feel like for a lot of you, and a lot of you will understand what I'm talking about, like when you truly get regulated and you do a lot of mindset work, you do a lot of trauma healing, you feel like, where was this version of me the entire time? And there's usually a noticeable uptick in your brain as well too, where you actually just feel a lot wiser and smarter, because what a surprise. That emotional side for a lot of us isn't so domineering anymore, and we're able to connect better with, that other hemisphere of our brain, the left side that's more rational and logical. And it's like, wow, like how was I functioning, up until this point? I'm glad that I went through this at the age of 28, but like, I feel sorry for a lot of people who end up, in this dysregulated state for so long that when they finally exit it, it's like, holy shit, like, who on earth am I right now? Like, what on earth is going on? So, yeah, it's a real rediscovery of self. So, yeah, just want to say, that goes out there to anyone, regardless of their attachment style. I know a lot of people here are still very upset with regards to their avoidant exes. You're allowed to be. That's where you're at. But when you get out of this stage, you'll eventually realize that a lot of this had very little to do with the avoidant person in your life, and it's got more stuff to do with your upbringing. A story for another time, because I think a lot of you probably aren't there yet. It's totally okay. Anyways, let's continue. I'm worried I'm getting stuck in the anger phase. Any tips on how to process this? Yes, so what you're going to do is you're going to burn their house down. You're going to find them, and you're also going to send anthrax to their post box. It would be ideal if you can all do this behind, fake accounts, and also report them for sexual harassment, because nothing gets your validation for, justice like being a stalker and also harassing them back. That's the way to do it. But in all seriousness though, one of the things that I found really helped me was rage journaling. I am a big fan of just getting a scrapbook or a journal and just going to town and venting why I am so mad about how I was treated by this individual. Give yourself 10, 20 minutes, which you time, where you just write, your thoughts and feelings about what you've been through, and allow yourself to then rip up whatever you write or burn off the end of it. I think that it's really important to understand that even though you may feel like you're turning into a horrible, angry person, it's a season. It's a phase. It's not going to last forever. And you will eventually feel a lot better down the line as well too. Like, honestly, it's really important to validate it. And I think if you're having any resistance to releasing that anger, it might be a protective part of you that feels scared to actually get this out. I know for me in therapy, when I've had to have moments of being angry, to get stuff out, there is an instinctive part of me that comes up being like, is it even safe to say some of the unsavory stuff I'm about to say to this person who's here with me right now? Because I got to tell you, I feel really shitty about that. And then after sort of like confirming with my therapist that it's okay to say what I say, it's actually very cathartic to get it out with another person as well. And I'm like, thank God. Another way you can do this somatically, and this is a bit of an extreme example, is often they have in a lot of cities and states, they have rage rooms where you can quite literally get like plates and jugs and mugs and things and just smash and break them with like a sledgehammer. That's a really good thing for a lot of people to do to just get that anger out of their system. I think I also saw another person, they quite literally got like a blow-up doll, which they then started like punching repeatedly to just get a lot of that anger out of their system. The other day I saw someone had got like a dummy, which they were doing the same thing with, and I was like, actually, that's probably a really healthy way of getting that anger out of your system. Because we need to find somatic ways. Like, I know for me, I often get a pillow and I start scrunching it up as I just start saying, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you. It really helps for me. So as this person here says, punch pillows. Find something that ideally isn't going to cause property damage or send you to prison that you can take your anger out on in a way that actually feels good. Hopefully the place that you're staying also has, a lot of sound, muffling, so you're not going to get reported by your neighbors for being extra. But yeah, that's recommendations that I would have for you if you're trying to work through that anger. Because yeah, you don't want it to stick around, but you need to find outlets for it. And again, don't worry, it's a phase. Like, it's not going to last forever. All right, next question. I feel sadness, immense rage, as well as fear of what is hiding within people who seem secure. Whoa, that's new. Okay, interesting. So, as in like people who seem secure. So as in not necessarily securely attached people. You mean people who present secure, right? In which case, yes, that is a very valid fear that you would have, very valid feelings that you would have as well too. So if the angle for this is I have mixed feelings, big mixed feelings, and you're really feeling quite intense about, the idea of dating again and being concerned about someone appearing like they have it all together, and you're just about to and if they do betray your expectations, you're going to blow up at them. I think what I would say is there's probably a fear of there's probably a lot of self-trust issues there in terms of, I worry I can't trust myself in dating. And I think it's really important to understand there that it's probably there's real fears of being hurt again. I think there's also the anger from the hurt you've suffered previously. And there's also probably a lot of internal shame and embarrassment for how you may not have been able to see the signs when it happened. Because, to give credit to these avoidant attachers, I think a lot of them are very genuine in the early stages of dating. I truly believe they mean every word they say. But I think we can often feel like we were completely, misled by these people, because what they do is often very misleading. They don't tell us about their attachment injuries if they do know that they have them. And if they do know they have them, they usually undersell those injuries in the first place. And I think that what's really terrible is that you can often feel like, I just don't know if I can trust again to get out there and dating. So yeah, it's pretty awful. So I think your feelings are very valid. All right, let's keep going. My ex posted pictures of herself that I took of her from trips post-breakup. I reached out and she sent me back a video of her kissing another guy. She's continued to post pics of herself from our trips and dates. Why would she post these from our time together, as she seemingly hates me? Does she? I'm assuming this is someone who probably has a very strong, fearful, avoidant attachment style. Okay, so my interpretation of what's going on there. It sounds like there's actually a few things that are going on. One, she's probably obsessing over you from a distance, and also still wants to keep some of those memories, fond feelings for you, where she's able to feel a bit safer, away from you. But she has strong, very strong fight parts of her that when you get close, she finds ways to shut you down and to keep you at arm's length because she doesn't feel comfortable being that close to you. So I think what you're getting is a really good example of, maybe a bit of splitting, where she idolizes you 1 minute, but then, finds ways to devalue you the next. I think she's also got multiple parts that are going on, like trying to hold on to you in a very secret, obsessive way without actually acknowledging it as well. A lot of dismissive leaning, fearful avoidance try and disavow and also not want to acknowledge their own feelings for past lovers. They will often, have trinkets, knickknacks, belongings of past exes where they'll keep it around, but they don't want to face reality that they actually still, like a past ex. So I think it's very much a case of she wants to have her cake and eat it too. She wants all the good feelings and the good times and keep you at a distance where she's got her options open. But anytime you get close, she will shut you down because it's all about how she feels, in control of that situation. Gotta say, what she did to you, particularly with showing a video of this new person she's dating, is 100% abusive. Terribly abusive behavior. Not okay. You don't have to put up with that shit. Easier said than done for a lot of you, and I get that it's pretty painful, but I gotta tell you, that behavior, terrible. All right, let's keep going. What can I do if my avoidant does not want a relationship with me, but still wants to keep me in his life? Every time I try to end things, he becomes anxious and convinces me to continue. I want love and affection. Friendship is all I get, though. What can I do? Okay. I can't give advice, but I'm going to say what I would do in a situation like this. Bear in mind, I am not you. And I've got to be honest, when I read that, it sounds to me like you're in a very heightened emotional state, which is valid given the way in which this relationship's been going. So let me just say this. If you're in a position like this person is here, where you're really in a position of like, what do I do? You know, like they're still offering me friendship and I want to be with them in a relationship. I've tried blocking them and you feel a bit helpless, right? You're feeling like, I don't know how to handle this situation. It's often because you're in hardcore fawning mode, right? And you're also acquiescing a lot of your own power to them, hoping that they will man up, girl up, do whatever it needs to be mature about it and move on like a sensible human being. But you're dealing with someone who likely is a fearful avoidant with very addictive tendencies. And right now, they ain't gonna have boundaries. They don't have boundaries. And from the sounds of it, it sounds like, you know, you're not really 100% sure of your boundaries in this situation, which is understandable given the fact that this is a very, very murky situation that you're in. And it's, honestly, if this is your first time going through it, I'm really sorry, because this sounds like it would be causing you not only a lot of overwhelm and hurt and pain, but also a lot of confusion because of the way in which he's navigating this, where it seems like he wants you 1 minute, but he doesn't want you completely. Okay, if it were me, I would actually need to get really regulated. I'd actually say you're not ready to leave. Like, frankly, when I read that, I'm like, you're not ready to do anything just yet. I think you're very much in the emotional thick of it. It sounds to me like when I read that, I'm like, you're probably feeling quite, you know, overwhelmed by the situation. And if it were me, I probably would want to get educated on what's going on. I'd probably want to understand what this dynamic is, the pattern of it, how it's a trauma bond, how it's being controlled by your avoidant partner. And if that information lands, then the next thing I would do is I would work on my attachment style to become more secure, to see if there is a secure way of making this work, because that's going to lead to one of two things. They're either going to shift in the direction of wanting to actually build a secure relationship with you, or it's going to show that they don't have the bandwidth for humility and change. And at that point, usually I find a lot of my clients who've been in the boomerang cycles with fearful avoidance get to a point where they're like, I've had enough of this, goodbye. And I don't want to deal with it. Now, the reason I'm not giving you a direct piece of advice saying, break up, this is going to kill you if you don't stay in it, is because I often find those that eventually do break up need to go through, unfortunately, a few more rounds of this. They need to get an understanding as to what's going on. They need to depersonalize it. They need to start regulating themselves. They need to start working on becoming more secure, if at least in action only, to try and understand how to work through this. A lot of you who've just been one and done by avoidant attachers, who are maybe more dismissive in their disposition, frankly, your journey is not quite the same. A lot of you who are in more of an addictive relationship with, you know, a fearful avoidant who's boomeranging, you've probably got, you know, you need to think about it very differently. So just please bear in mind, I know so many people who've dated fearful avoidance who've actually just needed to stick it out a bit longer. I know it's not the answer you probably want to hear, but you attempting to leave right now and to, you know, set boundaries often backfires horribly on your nervous system. And you often do it from a place of like revenge and hoping that they'll eventually turn around and want to be with you. So don't want to recommend you do that. But yeah, I think if you are aware that you are in a cycle, particularly with a fearful avoidant or even a dismissive who's boomeranging, the quicker you wisen up to that situation and start setting boundaries, it will do you a world of good for your mental and emotional well-being. Most of you who are coming here, I'm sorry, you're in cases where it's not going to get better. And I've heard of people who've been in these situationships for upwards of 10, 20 years, and they need to accept the fact that they're probably not going to get what they want. When I hear what you've written, which is beautiful, by the way, it actually sounds like you want a full committed relationship. You want to have someone who can actually love you properly because you want affection. And who doesn't want that? I know, I even was speaking to a client earlier today who was saying to me, I find it just so hard to ask for what I want because back when I was growing up, I just never got the opportunity to get my needs met from people because I would always be shut down. And I think that's the curse for a lot of us who have developmental trauma, CPTSD, and attachment injury, is that a lot of us, particularly those that are anxiously attached, are terribly scared to just say, I want a complete relationship. You know, I want a full, emotionally available relationship. And I think it's because we're so scared of being rejected again that we suppress that desire down and feel so scared to say it because there's the real risk of being rejected yet again by a significant person in our life. So yeah, I can understand why it's very hard to ask for that. And it's why I think I get annoyed by a lot of social media accounts who drum this message of self-abandonment and act like you should just be able to ask for what you need. So much easier said than done. You know, we've also got to remember too, and this is another thing to think about, even though I'm personally not looking for a boomeranging relationship, maybe, and hear me out on this, maybe in a world of choice, people are actually allowed to choose the kind of dynamics they want. And if you really love this person and you also enjoy this dynamic, who am I to say what you should do? My attitude, and this is my attitude, not shared by everyone, is, you know, if it's causing me harm and injury to my health and overall well-being and happiness and it's not being fixed, I don't want it. But some people, you know, want different things and they're allowed to want different things if they want. But, you know, I personally have my own individual, not counsellor, I have my own individual opinions on that, saying, you know, relationship stress will catch up with you and kill you if you don't think about that. But I genuinely think that it's really important to respect the choices of people as well too. So that's why I don't go telling people what they should do in these dynamics as well. But for you who wrote this, I'd say you really need to educate yourself on what's going on. So yeah, that's that. All right, let's continue. Why do they get with someone they have nothing in common with? The rebound is his complete opposite and not his type, and she is nothing like me. He told everyone he didn't even like her before he started seeing her. Do they eventually feel boredom when they get into a relationship like this? Well, you've partially answered your question. So, you know, I think you've got to understand that a lot of the time when they do that, it's often maybe a case that the person that they're, you know, dragging and saying, they're not my type, I don't like this person, is also someone that could be the devil they know versus the devil they don't. It could also, it's another thing to think about too, it's a form of self-sabotage. Go with someone where there isn't the risk of rejection. Go with someone where it's like a downgrade. You know, I was chatting with a client yesterday where they were saying, look, as an avoidant attacher, I'll happily be with someone who came out of Satan's ass because I know that I can tolerate the intolerable, but you give me someone who actually treats me well and makes me feel good, that's going to trigger every ounce of fear in my body because it makes me fear that I'm unlovable and I'm not good for anyone who actually is worthy and respectful, and I don't want that because that's going to hit me really hard. I know a lot of people who don't have this attachment injury would maybe not understand why someone would say that, but you've got to understand that for a lot of these individuals, the person they're dragging is their self-sabotage, is their comfort zone, is the person they can get rid of without worrying about it. It's not going to trigger them. Yes, they'll get with this person and they may not like it, they may be annoyed by it, and they may always have a foot out the door ready to go whenever they want to, but it's not going to be the thing that, you know, triggers them the way you do because of what you represent to this person. So please bear that in mind. It's a great question though. A lot of people ask it too. Let's see. By the way, guys, as always, you ask great questions, and I can see there's a few new people here to this live as well too, which is great. So love this. When does our rational and adequate brain win over our emotional confusion in terms of healing? Ooh, great question. I can't give you like a specific time frame because everyone's on a different clock, but I will give you some clues of when it's happening. I find that a lot of people, and please bear in mind, for those of you that are still in the thick of this, you may not be ready to hear what I'm about to say, so trigger warning, this may be uncomfortable for a lot of you. I find that when our rational brain is starting to take over, we're starting to say different things to ourselves. We're not so preoccupied what our avoidant ex is thinking and feeling. Instead, we're more thinking about, wait a minute, I don't like how I was treated in this situation. That didn't feel great. You might also find that you're actually starting to find that the label of avoidant attachment, if it's true to your experience, really does provide a lot of language to explain what happened. You're like, oh my God, that makes sense. And it starts to, flip a switch in your brain where you're like, wait a minute. I'm actually viewing this a bit differently now, and my narrative of things is starting to change. Your narrative will probably go from, why did this happen to me, to more of, how dare this happen to me? And then eventually you'll find that as you exit the anger phase, you'll eventually get to a stage where you're like, you know what? I'm disappointed and sad at the way it ended, but also I feel as though my emotion is well and truly out of it. And this is a big one. You might actually get to a point where you're like, I don't really wish them ill. I wish them all the best. I don't care whether they live or die, but I no longer really care about them. That's a real sign of like when we're getting into that more indifferent place. A very, very advanced thought that I will hear where I'm like, wow, this is impressive, is when if you can connect the pain you're feeling now to pain you've experienced in the past, is when you're like, wait a minute, the reason I'm really feeling a lot of this is because I've got unhealed abandonment wounds, or I've got unhealed trauma from a previous experience. And I can see that it's actually got little to do with them, but more the way in which they pressed a very big button in me. And it doesn't have as much to do with them specifically. Like when you're starting to like connect those dots between your upbringing to this experience, if you already have attachment injury, for those of you that are secure, you're probably not going to be asking these questions. Then you'll start to feel like, wait a minute, okay, I think I can move on from this. A lot of people who actually are secure leaning have actually found that by writing out, the event of what happened, like writing out the emotionally significant moments of what happened, or what I recommend my clients as part of my course is to do an ick list where you write out all the ways in which this person emotionally hurt you or upset you or disappointed you. It starts to allow you to see things with more clarity as to how this experience has actually injured you. And that's when you're able to connect more of the logic and the emotion together and be like, wait a second, now I can see things a bit more clearly. And you may not immediately find it stops the rumination, but it just reduces the intensity of enough for logic to start to prevail and for you to kind of get the ick with the experience and be like, oh wow, I really wouldn't want to be with someone who treats me like that again. You notice that you also gain a lot more self-respect. You gain a lot higher standards where you're like, fuck, I am never being with a person who treats me that way again. And you may find that you also, really start to recognize your boundaries because you're like, oh, didn't like feeling anxious in that way. Didn't like, the fact that I was treated in that way. That's a boundary for me going forward. Will not accept that shitty behavior from anyone who I date again. That is where I really start to hear in my clients those shifts where it's like, and rationality is starting to prevail, which is really, really good. So yeah, there's some of the signs that you are starting to get your logic, your rational brain back in control, and it's starting to nicely blend with your emotional brain. So yeah, that's my sign for that. Let's continue. These are great questions as usual. Let's see. We've done that one. What features of an avoidant are more noticeable within 3 months? They've broken up with you. No, I'm joking. I think some of the things that are obvious, but it's subtle still, would be the way they talk about certain things. Like I find that usually I can pick it within a matter of minutes because avoidant energy is very easy to identify. When you see it, you're like, oh, here we go. I think if you're not someone who's good at picking up the energy, the signs that I find are really obvious would be they tend to be very fantastical thinkers about things. Like I've met some avoidant people in my time where they'll start, and it's not because they're high. They start talking about, things like, oh, isn't this like a beautiful place that we're in? Like, it's really green over there. It's like, all these people are so beautiful. Like, there's this real sort of like heightened emphasis on the superficiality of things. When you talk about things that are emotional with them, like say, hey, my dad's going through a real health scare, they might change the subject or fail to really sit with you when you're going through it. You may find that when you're having a stressful moment, they, are like, oh my God, I've never seen you so angry before. When it's like, I'm not angry, I'm just stressed. And they almost can't sit with what you're going through, to the point where they might be looking for solutions to help you out rather than actually sitting with what's going on. They may also start talking about how they don't want a label on the relationship. That, even though you've been going great so far, they just got out of a relationship like 8 months ago and they don't want to feel pressured to put a label on it just yet. You may find that they also lack a lot of emotional language to describe things. Like, you may find that if you're talking about past relationships, it's all very superficial details with them. They're not really going to go into much detail about who, like their accountability. Introspection is not something that you're probably going to notice. And if it is there, it's going to be very shallow and it's not going to be that great. Even if they say they're in therapy, you may find that they're more engaged with the superficial aspects of therapy, the mindfulness, the acupuncture. Hell, they're looking at doing an ayahuasca trip in April. They're really interested in this, the pseudo-psychology side of things, the spiritual stuff. And I've got nothing wrong with some of those methods. Like if you're doing shrooms, you're doing caps, you're doing MDMA, wonderful, more power to you. I've got nothing wrong with that in theory. But you may find that they don't talk about trauma. They don't talk about adversity. They don't like having conversations that involve life and death sort of issues, where we've got to put our mature pants on and really think about, the rigors of life. So usually I find there is more of that childlike energy, the Peter Panning of like, I want to go with the flow. There's some of those subtle signs that it's like, I think you're a bit shallow. So that's something that can definitely happen. I often find too that they can be very preoccupied, particularly fearful avoidance and actually that's not true. Both fearful and dismissives can be preoccupied with their image at times and the way they convey themselves. You may find that their friends are, numerous in number, yet they don't even know a single one of them all that well. They may also have real big concerns about, their best friend in life, worrying that they're not, lovable to their best friends, but be afraid to actually communicate that to them because they just think, oh, well, the timing's not right. I just don't want to say that because it'll cause an argument. And so they're very conflict averse. You may find that they're having a lot of, insomnia because of heightened anxiety, but God forbid you call it anxiety because they'll say, I don't want to put a label on it. And they're very, very concerned with having any qualities to them that might be seen as bad. They're very secretive about who they really are inside of them. They don't want to disclose much. Maybe they're more interested in getting to know about you, or conversely, talking about the mundane aspects of their life when they're at work, who they're with. They're not really engaged in the more deeper, meaningful things. So yeah, there are a handful, possibly a book worth of like signs that you're putting some of this, there's some of this stuff that's showing up. I can see someone here says, mine puts his avoidant attachment down to depression. Is that what it is? I want to make it clear that a lot of avoidant attachers who, are deeply codependent do not want to face reality. And a lot of them don't want to recognize that they have intimacy problems. They know they have intimacy problems much of the time, but they don't want to state it because they're so worried about, how they're looked, how they're perceived. So it's very, they're very big on the impression management. To kind of get, like if I was going to build an avoidant attacher for everyone, right? Let's name them Tom. Tom was, a apparently bullied as a child. I believe that. And so in response to that, what Tom did was, Tom was overweight and bullied as a child, particularly by his mum. And what Tom did was he became his mum's best friend. He became very athletic, lean, and ripped. Tom went to work as a doctor. Not because he particularly loves medicine, but that's because what his mum really likes. And Tom, has thousands of friends on Facebook. Tom has had a history of dating women where he's tended to just find something in them that he doesn't really like and get rid of them very quickly. Tom has issues with sleep where he's constantly up at late at night and he's not able to regulate his sleep. He worries about his performance reviews. He worries that he's not good enough for a lot of people and also is letting people down all the time. And yet Tom, to the outside world conveys a lot of charisma and charm. He's funny. He's really good at, presenting himself as the life of the party. Yet, he doesn't think therapy is the answer. He doesn't think that he needs to necessarily work on trauma. Like, what's that? Something that survivors of war have? Tom just thinks that maybe he just overthinks a lot of things. That maybe he just gets a little bit too worried about things. And it's not anxiety. It's just a case that his brain just works overtime. Maybe that's ADD. I don't know. Let's get on a prescription of medication and do that instead. That's the kind of person I would build as an avoidant attacher. I can see already someone said here, yeah, sounds like my ex. Well, it's like, hey, there's plenty of Toms out there. And if I could think of a female equivalent name for a Tom, I would throw it out there. So let's just call them Jess for the sake of the argument. But yeah, it's, there's that. I can see some people are competing with me in terms of where I move in the future. Listen, I'm taking bets and also money. You want me to come and visit you? Pay for my flight. I've been to Denmark. I love it. I would happily go back there again. I thought that the city of Copenhagen was beautiful. You want me to move to California? I'm happy to do that too, but make it worth my while because I like getting paid. Anyways, let's keep moving. So let's do more of this stuff. We've done that. We've done this. I can see one of my favorite users has commented. So, by your explanation, it seems that obsession has not to necessarily manifest as you being seen under a good light. How does this relate to the concepts of Phantom X and the one who got away? Oh, I'm so glad you've asked this question. Great question. Is it possible to become one of those even when you're not perceived in a positive way? Thanks in advance. Yeah, absolutely. Think about it like this. When you are bitching and griping about something, just because you're complaining about something over and over and over again, like I'll go back to the Jack and Jill example I used at the beginning of this live. You may not have been there for it because it would have really answered this question. Let's go back to Jack and Jill. So Jack's been dumped by Jill. Jill's gone off to date this new guy. And Jill constantly brings up how Jack was needy, he was obsessive, over and over and over again. And the new partner's like, babe, I've heard this story 1,000 times. Are you sure you're not over this and you sure you don't need to speak to someone about it? And Jill's like, no, I'm over it, it's fine. But she keeps bringing it up over and over and over and over again. And, it's one of those things where obsession has a funny way of manifesting in ways that aren't obvious. That when we think of, people who manifest their obsession, it can still manifest as like, you're clearly not over this person because you are still emotionally fixated on this person. So even if you're not the traditional Phantom X where you're painted in this loving light of like, oh my God, they were so nice to me. They were amazing. We never had any problems. I don't know why I got rid of them or why we broke up. They're the one that got away. Conversely, and this is subject to splitting as well too, you can be Satan's spawn in their eyes. You can be the one that was constantly complaining and never anything was good enough. You had constant bottomless demands and needs that were never going to be filled by anyone in a relationship. And it's like, wow, lots of intensity there. The thing to understand, and a lot of people get it twisted, is they think that if you are the subject of hate, that means that this person doesn't have any positive feelings for you. Love and hate exist on a funny little dime where they're both operating from the same intense emotion. Like, you can be one side of that, like any side of that coin, depending on how a person's feeling in the moment because of these big feelings that they have for you, right? So I think a lot of people think, if they're mad at me, that means they don't love me anymore. Not necessarily. That does not necessarily mean they don't love you. It might just be a case of that right now, they're just mad at you because of how they feel. They haven't necessarily resolved some of the other emotions that are behind it. Do you know, another really good example, and I love going to my LGBT examples because I can pull on these for days, because, similar to when people are in the closet, when we disavow parts of ourselves, a very common aspect of denial can be rage. So if you've got someone who's like closeted, for instance, and is like really homophobic and they're really out about it, that rage that we see against people who are in the LGBT community might actually be defensive rage from the fact that it's like, oh no, you actually like being in this community, you're just afraid to admit it. Rage, fear, love, even though the love has many manifestations too, it's one of those things where these emotions, these heightened emotions, have funny ways of all, intermingling with one another. And so that's why I said at the beginning of this entire live, when I was talking about obsession with avoidant attaches, anytime there's like heightened emotion, that's when my ears perk up and I'm like, oh, okay, I can see we're dealing with someone who's not rational, but I can understand irrational behavior very well because I'm no stranger to working through a lot of my stuff and working with a lot of clients on theirs. So I'm like, oh yeah, this is clearly what I call unfinished business. And when things are unfinished business, you're opening up an entire suitcase of all kinds of big emotions. So when you say the question like, oh, how does, when we're thinking of avoidant attaches and when they're thinking of like the positive version of the Phantom X, it's not necessarily like how they obsess over you. Like, they might obsess over you in other ways as well too, which I detailed at the beginning of the live. So I won't go over that again now for the sake of the fact that I don't want to repeat myself. But yeah, that's just another example of that. All right, let's keep going. He shared a song with the name I'm Sorry. Does this come from a genuine accountability? He is FA/DA. I'm assuming you mean dismissive, leaning, fearful avoidant. I actually shared an example of this because that's a great example. So yeah, that probably actually does sound like a gesture of apology to you, because even today I was chatting with a mate of mine who was saying their avoidant ex has funny ways of like communicating with them through song titles as part of a shared playlist. And this person I was speaking to doesn't look at that playlist like ever, hasn't contributed to it in months and years, but they noticed that it was updated the other day and were like, oh Jesus, and if it's not done through songs, it could also be done through memes. This person knows what I'm talking about. Sometimes it's done through memes as well too. Like, it might be a case where they try and convey a complex emotional thing through the memes or the ambiguous Insta posts. You'll often find they might use spirituality, pseudo-psychology posts to try and explain things. So there's that too. I can see someone here says I missed their question. If you're in the question mark box, I hope I haven't missed you, but I will get to you very shortly. Oh, okay, here we go. I dumped my dismissive avoidant ex. I couldn't cope anymore and did it abruptly. I felt bad and checked to see if he was okay, and he ghosted me. He's straight back on Tinder and not heard a word. Found out about him using a Thai massage parlor. Was obsessed with OF girls, OnlyFans girls, etc., and never wanted sex with me. Is there a second part to that question, or is that it? Okay, so I'm going to assume that was a statement, not so much a question. Okay, so when it comes to your situation, I want to say you're not alone. I'm very sorry that you've had that experience. And when I read that, I got the sense that what I was hearing was when you rejected him, it probably came from a very heightened panic state, because it doesn't sound to me like you're particularly indifferent to the situation. Like, it actually sounds to me like when you wrote that, it's almost just like worry about how he thinks of you off the back of this. And so it sounds to me like his behavior of not having sex with you and being obsessed with OnlyFans girls, which, by the way, you have every right to dump a boyfriend over that if they're not, respecting the sanctity and the boundaries of the relationship. But something tells me that whilst that happened, I feel like the eject button, was pressed in a very panicked state. And it doesn't sound to me like, even though that's happened, you've resolved all of your feelings off the back of this experience. I could be wrong, but that's what I'm reading from this. But I also think too that, for him to ghost you after you did that, even though he's the one who's responsible for the actions that led up to this, makes me think, this is a man who does not want to hold accountability. His capacity for humility is zilch from the sounds of it. And it suggests to me that, he's now trying to escape the guilt and the shame. One thing you got to know is if you're the one who breaks up with an avoidant attacher, dismissible, otherwise it's usually you'll be the one to break up with them, if they haven't done it to you, is they do not like that because that hits their shame wound and their fear of abandonment, which may surprise a lot of you in thinking, avoidants have a fear of abandonment? Yeah, they do. If you were the one to break up with them, you will still go through the same breakup experience if you were the one who was dumped, but they can get really badly angry about that and make out like you're the problem, you're the bad person. Some of them may even engineer that you're the one to do that because for them, they don't have the guts to do it themselves, because then this preserves them as not looking like the bad person in this. But if you hold them accountable and like, you've done X, Y, Z, I do not appreciate how you've done this, they absolutely will try and banish you because they cannot handle shame. So unfortunately, that is a thing. In any case, just want to say, I'm really sorry that you went through that because that's fucking awful. I can see someone here has read, to the person who asked the question about the songs, I feel you. It can happen after months, years, and that was it. No further actions, no moves, just songs saying, my love, let's meet at the seaside. And can you see even with that, this is a great example of that limerent sort of thinking and feeling. It's a really beautiful way of an example of showing like when an avoidant attacher is admiring you from a distance, you look like an absolute limerent object to them. You look amazing, hot, attractive, you're Superman, Superwoman, super person, and you can do no wrong. But again, as soon as you get close, all those intimacy fears perk up again too. So, such a great example of how dysregulated they are and they're engaging in fantasy thinking. Now, I've talked a lot about fantasy, and I tell you what, people who are in an emotionally dysregulated space are no stranger to fantasy. People who are anxiously attached absolutely engage in a lot of fantasy thinking a lot of the time too. But a conversation for another day. All right, let me just see if I've done all my questions in the chat, and then, in the question mark box, and then I'm going to go to the chat. Will I make a video about spiritual bypassing of avoidant attachers? I would love to. In fact, I think I did a video similar to this a while back. I've done a few videos discussing spiritual bypassing, but I love that as a topic idea. I actually plan to do quite a few videos in the future with my team. So both Megan and Catherine have experience working in the addiction space, and I want to do lives with them if they've got the capacity to talk about sex and porn addiction with avoidant attachers, because it is bloody common for avoidant attachers to be porn and sex addicts. So yeah, that is absolutely going to happen. Someone's just asked me a question. I wanted to talk and she didn't really want to. I was so hurt, I said I can't do this anymore. So I was like, block me then, and they did. Won't even give my stuff back, of course. Do you think this person will ever gain self-awareness? Will they reach out and apologize? Do you want my a very honest answer or my hopeful answer? Maybe I'll give you both. Firstly, before I do either of those things, I'm really sorry that you're in this situation. You sound actually very similar to the person I was reading out before, because it sounds to me like, you didn't want to break up with this person. And I'm really, really sorry that this has happened to you, because, it sounds to me like now this person's holding your stuff hostage, and it might make you feel like you can't move on properly. And it does feel probably like, this is really, doing your head in, because it probably sounds like you would still like to be with this person if you had the chance to make it work. Okay, so my answers. Will this person gain self-awareness? The hopeful answer is if they have a rock bottom moment that changes their world and makes them realize, I need to work on myself. I can see someone here says I missed their question. Don't worry, I'll get to it. I usually don't read all the questions that are given to me all the time. It's just because sometimes I'm like that. But I will get to you in a hot second. Please bear in mind that, these individuals need a real rock bottom moment to shake them out of their way of being. And even if that does happen, it's not guaranteed for them to change. And this is where I'm going to go to my honest answer. Probably not, because a lot of the severe cases, and if you listen to the podcast, the Ken Reed's podcast, where I read out cases of this all the time, I gotta be brutally honest. Like, it's highly, I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's highly unlikely that they're going to. Do you know how sophisticated avoidant attachment is? Particularly if it's the severe end, these people don't want to acknowledge that they have issues. They have such big defenses against guilt and shame, and also wanting to admit they have a problem. They're big perfectionists. And so anytime these lights, are shone on them, it's one of those things where it really, really means they're probably not going to change that much. So yeah, I can see this person who has answered. They said, I said I can't do this anymore, and they said I can't either. That's why I said block me then. I just hate that I said that, lol. I was hurt, lol. Can I also just say, this is me being a cheeky therapist moment. When I see people also say lol like that, it makes me think we are now going into fawning territory. So you don't need to sugarcoat it with a lol. I understand you're probably feeling a bit embarrassed and ashamed of yourself, but it's okay. It's a very valid thing. I can understand why you said that, because you're probably in a very heightened distressed state, and you're probably also feeling, like you were trying to get some, control over the situation. But probably like the person I read out before, you probably regretted the fact that you said that because you didn't really want that. You were probably just reacting out of pain, as you said. So it's okay. I know why you did what you did. I've done similar things too when I've just been pissed off and, being like, and it's that real thing of like, I could understand if you did it because you felt like nothing was changing, nothing was happening, and you were like, well then just block me then, because you're so frustrated that nothing is actually getting fixed. So I get why you probably did that. So yeah, totally fair. I can see you've said scene. It's okay. The only reason I pointed that out is because Abby, the queen of the fawn response, made a really good point yesterday, which I noticed. She was saying signs of like working on the fawn response is when you no longer say lol to things that are, vulnerable admissions of yourself, to try and like soften the blow, to try and soften feeling like, ashamed of these unsavory parts of yourself. And I was like, damn, Abby, that's a very good observation that you just made. She's got like such great content on the fawn response. So if you ever want to check her out, definitely do that. All right, let's get to the question. I'm going to go to the person who asked me to read their question out. Apologies for not reading it. It's not personal, I should say. It's not you, it's me. I don't think you've actually got your question here in the chat. So if you want to throw it in the question mark box. So if I missed it, throw it in the question mark box and I'll do it. All right, let's go back to. Wait? Did this question that I just flicked out go to? Oh, no way. No way I can make the questions go in the chat. Sorry, I'm just having an epiphany. What the fuck have I been doing all of this time? Oh my god, has this always been here? Holy shit. I've been doing lives, reading out these damn questions without actually, putting this out there. Like, what the hell? Sorry, forgive me for having a moment of like real, excitement over this. This is wild. Like, oh my god, this is the best feature ever. Why didn't I do this before? Okay, this is great. And I agree with what this other person said. Your username is great. I'm assuming that's Sukablat, the Russian swear word, in which case that's very cool. All right, I'm going to tap and use this. This is great. Okay. What can I do if my avoidant does not want a relationship with me, but still wants to keep me in his life? Wait, did I read this? Every time I try to... Oh, no, I read that one. Sorry. Done that one. My bad. That was just liked, so that was really good. Okay, cool. Have I got any more questions here that I haven't answered? No. That's good. I think I can... All right. I think I can leave that one now, so we're all good. All right. That's gone. Okay, cool. I'm going to go through the chat and answer any questions that are there too. Apologies again for having a moment of excitement. I was like, oh my God, this is really fucking cool. So if you've got any questions for me now, throw them in the chat and I'll answer a few and then I'm going to go to bed because I want to chill. All right, so let's see what we got here. I can see someone who hasn't actually given me a question. They've given me a statement. My avoidant ex came back after 2 years. That's very common. So please bear in mind that a lot of avoidant attachers will come back, whenever the stars align for them sometimes. And so, it can be years after the fact, but it doesn't necessarily mean change. So please bear in mind that even if it's been like 8 years, 80 years, if they're still holding you out as a limerent object and they haven't, worked through their stuff, it's going to be more of the same. And some of these people are damn stubborn to change. All right. I love the anger phase, hoping the rebound drops his ass. That's very pointed. All right, I can see someone's thrown a few more questions in, I think. Okay. When you leave your dismissive avoidant, does it reaffirm the belief that they are unlovable, which cements their fears? That's actually more the FA that has that reaffirmed belief, but yes. Absolutely yes, for FAs. For DAs, if, you leave them, I think it more reaffirms their belief that relationships all end in failure and that it's just not for them, that it's not going to work out, or that they're not good enough for relationships. And so I think that can definitely happen. Someone here has asked me, what do I mean by limerent object? Okay, that's not my term. That's actually the crappy childhood fairy, Anna Runkle's term. She basically used that, if I recall correctly, because I don't remember how she used this in full context. She was basically saying how when someone becomes a limerent object, so, a fantasy person, you tend to obsess over that person and not see them for who they really are, was I think the way she was going about it. And the reason that it's a very useful phrase when we think about attachment issues is that those of us that are anxious and avoidant have a tendency to make the other person out to be a limerent object, a person that frankly isn't actually that. We try and make the person who, is in front of us not real, and it can cause us to be in these trauma bonded messes that we get into. And even though I find Anna's content is fabulous in general, she can be a bit harsh on, people who are in these cycles with avoidant attachers. In fact, she's harsher than me when it comes to avoidance, in my opinion. And I think that when it comes to this, we often see those that are anxiously attached get love bombed by the avoidance and think the avoidant is a bit of a limerent object. The avoidant often projects a lot of their hopes and fantasies onto the partner they're with and makes them a bit of a limerent object, regardless of their attachment style. The avoidant may also want to project that they are a limerent object by being very mysterious, aloof, charming, not giving away any of their vulnerabilities. And the person who's dating them, if they've got a big anxious attachment and they also show signs of codependency, may not want to face the fact that this person they're with is actually flawed. They're a human being. Limerent objects end when we heal through a lot of these childhood wounds and see people for who they are. So, yeah, that was that. All right, I can see that person gave me their question now. So, will he, my ex, ever answer my letter where I accused him of hurting me? He never ghosted before. I've got to be honest, in my experience when it comes to exes reading letters, they usually don't say anything in response to it because, again, it hits their shame wound. They'd rather banish you than actually acknowledge that they've done anything wrong. The accountability rate for avoidant attachers to actually sit with a letter that they've been given or a message from you and actually validate what you've been through is pretty bad, to be honest. It's not great. I remember when I voice messaged my ex, I got a very invalidating reply and response, and it wasn't great. So unfortunately, it's not really good. Now, you asking that question to me suggests to me that, I'm almost thinking there was probably a lot of emotion in that, and you probably wanted some acknowledgement from that. If you're going to, I don't want to say advice, but my general suggestion is that if you're someone who wants to send a letter to an avoidant ex for how they treated you, do it when you no longer give a shit about the response you're going to get. Easier said than done, because a lot of you probably need to work through your emotions before you get to that stage. But I think if you're doing it from a place of wanting them to validate and also acknowledge what they've done to you, a lot of them won't do that. They'll often be dismissive. They may ghost you. They may block you in a very retaliatory way. They may not even acknowledge the subject matter of the letter. And so it's very uncommon for them to acknowledge it. Sometimes, on rare instances, they may, respond to it. And they may do so. They're more likely to be a fearful avoidant if they do this. Because they'll be like, oh, I don't want to be a bad person. I don't want to, cause pain to you. And I really, care about you. They might do something about it. But the point is, in my professional experience, the response rate hasn't been high, unfortunately, which sucks. Because I think a lot of us are looking for acknowledgement for what happened. All right, how do you know when the dismissive avoidance situationship has run its course and you know they'll never come back? That's a hard question to answer. I think in terms of when a situationship has run its course, so let's assume they're still in the situationship with you, right? And you're talking about a DA, not an FA. For me, it would be when you realize that you're not getting your emotional needs met. You have tried to communicate with them ways to try and treat you better, and you've even tried to show up better in a more secure way, and nothing's getting better. And you are now at a point of frustration and burnout, and you're like, I just can't stick around here anymore. I'm just not getting my needs met in this relationship. That's when it's probably it's time to go. And I find that for a lot of the people that I work with, they've had to try everything in their toolbox to get to a place where emotionally they're like, I can tick that box off now and go to my grave knowing that I tried everything I possibly could to make that work, and I'm not going to necessarily think too much about what goes on from here. It's usually a pretty, confident place where they're just like, fuck this, I'm out. So that's usually the emotional state they're in. Now, as to whether or not they'll come back, as I read out one of the other statements that someone made where they're like, my DA came back after 2 years. Yeah, this person could come back. But I got to tell you, you should be concerned about them coming back, because if they do, what's your response going to be? How are you going to navigate that? What are your boundaries going to be? You're certainly allowed to entertain them. I'm not saying you shouldn't. But what I am going to say is you need to have very strong boundaries for yourself to protect your heart if that happens. I know if my ex ever came back, I'd definitely want to be very measured about how I go about things. Although I'll be honest, the more I've done this work on myself, the less I actually want to entertain that option. I'm just like, no, curiosity killed the cat. I'm not going to follow the cat. So yeah, just saying. For reference, this is added to that. This dismissive avoidant attacher wanted to marry me, but has gone through a rock bottom situation recently. Oh, yeah. The rock bottom situations and dismissives. Yeah, he's probably not coming back because he probably feels like the thing that he could control in his life was you. Now, I'm not saying he won't, but generally speaking, I've heard cases like this before. And usually I find if there's a family crisis, a work issue, sometimes they might come back, although that's pretty rare. But usually if they're feeling a lot of shame about something going on in their life that they can't control, you're going to be the one that gets the axe because they feel a lot of shame and they don't want to feel like a weak and, helpless person who can't support you. So yeah, there's that. All right, I'm going to do 2 more and then I'm out of here. All right, this isn't a question. Being abandoned wasn't as bad as I thought of being replaced, and that I was wrong about my thoughts of his attachment style. Is this normal? I like to do my work too. Oh wait, that is a question. So being abandoned wasn't as bad as I thought of being replaced, and that I was wrong about my thoughts to his attachment style. Is this normal? I like to do my work too. Not sure I understand the last part of that, but I think fears of being replaced, oh yeah, brutal. Many people have that with this because they think that if they get replaced, it confirms that there was something unlovable about them, that, whatever excuses were made, it confirms that you weren't good enough for this person in the first place. Huge fears and anxieties around that. I know I had them. That were terrible. So yes, it can absolutely be a big thing. Now, as for being wrong about his attachment style, I'm assuming, did you think that they were secure and then found out to your horror, oh shit, they're actually avoidantly attached? Because I've had that one. Like, often I know, and this goes back to the limerent object point, many people are in denial about their ex's attachment style. I cannot begin to tell you the number of people who thought their avoidant ex was actually secure. Like, so many people I've been with. Actually, interestingly enough, the fearful avoidant clients I've worked with have been the ones that defended their partner more and been like, but what if they were secure? And I'm like, what do you mean if they were secure? They wouldn't have done this to you. Like, I find a lot of people, they often dwell quite hard, for understandable reasons, and think, oh, but what if my ex was actually secure? They really knew what they wanted, and they just didn't want what they wanted with me. And I'm like, then they wouldn't have gotten this deep with you in the first place. And also, more importantly, what did they break up with you about? And was it something that could have easily been resolved with a conversation? And if the answer is yes, then that ain't the secure thing to have done. So I know it's not easy to understand for a lot of you who may be still thinking your ex is, secure, but there's a way to break up with people, and people who are more secure don't do this kind of breakup. So yeah. All right. Last one. I can see someone here says, it's not a question, it's a statement. I feel ashamed for still caring about him when I know I deserve better. No, that's fair. Look, listen, a lot of people still have that. They just lost what they feel like is the love of their life. I'm not here to take that away from them. Listen, when you've gone through an experience with an avoidant attacher, and you're someone who's also suffered a lot of emotional neglect in your life too, this is like being given a buffet of love. And you are someone who has been starved, unbeknownst to you or not, that you need a lot of emotional sustenance. When you're with someone like this, you often feel like you can be goofy, you can be yourself, you feel understood, safe, seen, heard, right? So, when they pull the rug out from underneath you, you haven't just lost a romantic partner. You've often lost your best friend. You've often lost the person who really understood you the most. You've now got crippling, usually anxiety wounds and some trauma off the back of it. And whatever wound wasn't healed, you've now got that doubled over as well too. But you've lost someone who, was important to you, still is important to you. You are bonding with this person. You care about this person. Energetically, you may still feel like you have, you can still feel them through the ether, if you will. These are people where there is a lot of intense emotional investment with them. So you have every right to be saying that. It's totally normal and valid. You'll get to a stage where eventually, well, I don't want to say you will, but, generally, a lot of people eventually flip the switch and you'll start reversing, being like, yeah, I don't like how I was treated by the person I thought was the love of my life. But for now, it's totally fair and reasonable. All right. Last one, my fearful avoidant ex broke up with me a month ago, and my birthday is in 2 weeks. I noticed he's adding sad songs to his playlist. If he reaches out, should I use it as a chance to check in with him? No. I'm going to be very adamant about that. No. No. That's his job. He needs to check on himself. He needs to be thinking about his well-being. He needs to, reconcile what these sad songs mean for him. If you want to, go ahead. I'm not going to stop you, but I wouldn't recommend it. I know that you're concerned about his well-being off the back of the breakup, but he did this to himself as much as to you too. This was his decision that he made, as horrible as it is, but he needs to work on this stuff. He needs to get regulated. And I know that a lot of you who are in the thick of it probably don't want to hear that, and you probably want to reach out anyways. Go ahead. It's not going to kill you. If you want to reach out, go ahead. It's not going to be the end of the world. But just bear in mind, probably not the smartest move to make. But hey, I found that the way out of this was by making every mistake known to mankind. So, that's why I'd say the road out of this, even though I know a lot of the coaches who work in this space, who actually are really good, who will give you advice on how to navigate this. They keep telling you, avoid my mistakes. I'm like, no, please make every fucking mistake possible, because this is the quickest way you will learn what you're up against or working with. So, who am I to say what you're working with or what you're not? So yeah, just want to say, please, 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 even though I wouldn't do that, go ahead, do what you need to do. All right. And let's see if there's anything else here that I need to check out. Oh my God. Everyone's giving me so many things. All right, I'm going to wrap this up. Everybody, thank you for participating in this live on Avoidant Attachers Obsessing Over Their Exes. If you want to check this out, I'm about to post this. And now to do a little bit of shameless sales stuff. For those of you who have just gone through this breakup and you're looking for support, my course is still available on sale if you want to get that for $150. It's intended for those of you who have just had a bad breakup with an avoidant attacher and you're looking for the first steps to heal, to get you into that anger phase where you can be like, right, now I need help. I want to take a moment here to say that I am looking at doing a group coaching program for those of you that have participated in that course. And so I'm going to introduce that in Feb and just do another trial of that and see how that goes. And if you guys like it, I will probably build out a bigger course, which is designed to help people who are in the anger phase, the disappointment phase, the how the fuck did I get here phase, to get you to that indifference place, right? So it's going to be, I'm going to try and throw in all my therapeutic things into a big signature sort of offer, because your boy wants to work less. And he also likes getting paid. But then also, in addition to that, if you are someone who wants your letter read out with regards to what you've been through, whether you were with someone who was avoidantly attached, anxiously attached, hell, you can even talk to me about a narcissist, I don't mind. Feel free to just submit your letter, because there's actually a few openings still available for that. And in fact, that's kind of a good thing for me, because if I'm not reading as many letters, I can actually discuss other topics like the porn and sex addiction, the spiritual bypassing stuff. So the good news is that there's plenty of stuff there that you can do. I could see someone here says, can I attend that course from Austria? Yes, you can. So you can absolutely do that. It's all on the link tree of my page if you want to check it out. We've actually received really good positive feedback for it, which is amazing. So it's a huge improvement from the first one. So again, ideally, not for people who are months down the line, who are more yeah, my ex was an asshole. You're not the target audience for this. The audience who are for this are people who are new to attachment theory, who've just been broken up with by someone who they suspect is avoidantly attached and are looking for steps to heal. That's for you. For those of you who want to send a letter to me, you can go to my link tree on my bio by clicking the link in my bio, and in that I have a link to submit your letter. I know some of you have been saying to me, hey, I've got a letter that's well over 2,000 words, which is the max. Listen, if you have a letter that's over 2,000 words, just message me privately and I'll negotiate with you to see if we can fit that in, because occasionally I have, but people have just had to pay a bit extra because, that's fair for me. But also means I can share your story out, and you can do that there. And I'm just trying to think if there's anything else that's coming out. Oh, and there's also a few new team members who are joining the team too. So that's happening as well. So yeah, that's the updates from me. Everyone, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to come back here. I'm going to do a live soon talking about codependency, because I really want to break that down for everyone as well too, because I feel like that's a very misunderstood term. And I want to use that in relation to attachment theory to help explain that, where it shows up with all the attachment styles, because it's not just an anxious attachers problem. And that is that. Have a lovely night, day, morning, and I'll catch you guys around next time.